G'day everybody, welcome to Shed Gospel. It's Nigel Woolley, and hopefully you're having a lovely day today and you're going to be encouraged from this video today. You have to forgive and excuse my blocked nose. I've just been getting over a bit of a head cold, so that's a bit of a thing that I'm dealing with at the moment. It's not COVID, thank God. So in terms of what I've got here today is a piece of paper, which is just a print off from Black's Law Dictionary. And there was a phrase in there that gives a great grounding to the way I think to view a lot of things in our law system today. But the foundations of our law system in its design has these built into it as well. So I got here the Code of Professional Responsibility from Black's Law Dictionary. It was written, and this was a release with amendments to February 24th, 1970. So it's this old book, Black's Law Dictionary, which is very famous. A lot of people know about Black's Law Dictionary. But in the preamble of the Black's Law Dictionary, it says, the continued existence of a free and democratic society depends upon the recognition of the concept that justice is based upon the rule of law, grounded in respect for the dignity of the individual and his capacity through reason for enlightened self-government. So that phrase there, enlightened self-government, I mean, there's two things he's pointing out here too. It's that one is the dignity of the individual. So the rule of law has to identify that you have a dignity, that your dignity must be preserved. I mean, what about consent for medical treatment or consent for certain things, or voting or something like that, where your integrity is preserved? They're trying to look after your sovereign rights that God has given you, but you also have them grounded in law through the Constitution. So it's based upon that they must have a respect for the dignity of the individual and his capacity through reason for enlightened self-government. So they're expecting that you are going to have some sort of enlightened self-government. What would that be like? As in that you have a moral compass of your own self, that inbuilt within you, that they're dealing with you based on law, but your own laws that you abide by in your own self is that you obey your conscience. You have a conscience. Your conscience is, for lack of better words, undefiled. Your conscience is something that is guiding your moral compass as such. And you're making your own determination and own decisions based on what you believe to be true and right, and that you're going to live that way in your own way, in accordance with your own beliefs. So what happens when they throw the restraints off on society? Say when you have the news media, but even just movies and things that's trying to change the culture, you lose something where the rule of law is sort of not having anything to work with. So if people have no moral compass, or if people are no longer respecting one another's dignity, then how can you have law working properly as far as the reinforcing of society is concerned? In terms of like what you would see with concrete. You have, say on a structure, you have the concrete itself, and you have the reinforcing. So if you have the law being like the reinforcing in the culture, which is like the concrete, I mean, you have to have good quality. It depends on two things, doesn't it? It depends on the integrity of that reinforcing, as in the integrity of the laws of our society. It has to be good quality laws. It has to be lawful laws. There has to be congruency in the laws as far as reinforcing is concerned. So, even in a concrete structure, they have to tie and weld that reinforcing together. So you can see the same parallel today with law. They have to make lawful laws, as in they have to be doing it properly at the reinforcing level. So imagine what I'm just giving you a bit of a word picture of, or a mental picture, that you have the two things when you have concrete. In a concrete structure, you have the law being like the reinforcing, but that reinforcing has to be a good quality steel, It has to be welded together properly. It has to be prepared properly, laid out properly as a framework, doesn't it? That concrete. And the framing has to be done before you pour the concrete. So you can't shove the law into a culture type thing that already pre-exists. That's maybe the limit to the analogy, but really, when you have the framers of the Constitution, they set out the framework. When they pour down a new footpath, they have that reinforcing already set in place to begin with before they pour the concrete. But so for us, being like the culture, having something to fit around and to be reinforced with is like we're being molded around this reinforcing, But we have to have certain things. We can't just have a lawless type culture. We can't have a rebellious culture. We can't have a culture that has no respect for another individual. We have to have certain restraints and safeguards on the morality of society for this to even work. If we had a nation full of people that did not care about their next door neighbour and they only did what was right in their own eyes and totally didn't care about their next door neighbour or anyone else that they dealt with, then the law would be kind of like not working with any good quality concrete, like the reinforcing not working with any good quality concrete. The concrete's breaking apart at the concrete level. Even though the law reinforcing is still there, the concrete is falling to bits. And so herein is the thing, that when you look at this whole thing about enlightened self-governance, people have to have their own moral compass. The culture is very crucial. The law is very crucial. They're not mutual. They're sort of like somewhat two separate things, but they have to work together to make the Australia that we want. And what happens is when you start having this you can have multi-ethnic society. You can have people from different backgrounds. Australia is a bit of a sort of like a soup as far as all these different ingredients that go together to make us up. But there has to be a common nucleus of values and a common nucleus of morality in Australia. And in our foundations, we had the Bible, we had the church, we had Christianity. Australia was viewed as a Christian nation. And that works with the law system that we have. Like it or not, like it or lump it. As Wayne Glue says, like it or lump it. That is the way it is. And so the original design was that the Bible helps to frame the laws of the land in terms of a respect for higher authority under God. But, as far as making laws for the land, even on a secular basis, you can still use the Bible as a good reference point for making lawful laws. It's fine. The way that the Bible sets out certain clauses, about not stealing, not killing, or not doing other things, or not defrauding your neighbour, not moving your neighbour's landmark, some of these other things. That's in the Bible, but it's also a secular value. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in. If you're not going to be happy if someone's moving your landmark, your neighbour's fence. You're not going to be happy if the neighbour's encroaching on your property. Doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not. Some of these things are just, it doesn't matter what religion you are. But, you can derive these things still from the Bible. And that was how a lot of this stuff was framed. And but the Bible was also there for the church to reform the culture. And as in like the seminaries and the churches and the monasteries and all these things that were producing a culture that was respectful, obviously under God, but respectful for authorities and authority figures, respectful for one another. The Bible teaches about loving one another and to be gracious and to forgive. Some of these other things are cultural things that you can also derive from the Bible, But what's happening is because of the attack on the culture, it's becoming such where the laws of the land aren't able to work properly with the culture anymore. And what they're doing also in the laws of the land, as I've been pointing out, is that they've been deviating away from it, making unlawful laws. And so the two things are a destruction of our nation. Both things are very crucial. And the laws need to be lawful. They need to be under our Commonwealth Constitution. They need to be lawfully made and enacted, policed, judged, whatever. All of that is important for law and order. We must have law and order. But that law and order must work with something else where it's not being used as a tool, as a weapon to destroy the culture or to give unscrupulous people huge advantages in the culture, giving them license to operate to destroy the culture. You know, such a thing like, for example, they might pass a law that says children are allowed to be freely able to choose their gender and identity, you know, which is a sort of an extreme, taking to an extreme the value of humanity, but to the point where they can then open up the culture for sowing all sorts of pedophilia in with the children. You know, they're operating at that level, aren't they? They're trying to create an opportunity with law to say, oh, people are so free, but then also at the same time to stop people from restraining that agenda in the culture, but it's been facilitated by law, such as Daniel Andrews' conversion practices bill. That is enshrining some of these evil things in the culture. And what that's going to do is that creates a vein of people that are above the law, for lack of better words, that don't have a moral compass. These kinds of people that use this stuff to their own ends often don't have a moral compass. They don't have any restraints. They don't have a line of morality of what is immoral to them. You know, they're into all sorts of things. They're into trying to attack children and go after children's sexuality. There's no restraint line there with them. But so, if they want to talk about the rule of law and talk about, oh yeah, we believe in the rule of law. Well, the thing about the rule of law, if you go back and have a look at Black's Law Dictionary, which I'm talking about today, in the preamble, it says, the continued existence of a free and democratic society depends upon recognition of the concept that justice is based upon the rule of law, grounded in respect for the dignity of the individual and his capacity through reason for enlightened self-government. Law so grounded makes justice possible, for only through such law does the dignity of the individual attain respect and protection. Without it, individual rights become subject to unrestrained power. Respect for law is destroyed and rational self-government is impossible. Wow, can't you imagine? That is so true today. It's like a prophecy almost. You can imagine that being exactly the way it is. You know, they're losing respect for law because of the unlawfulness of it. Individual rights have become subject to unrestrained power. Hasn't that happened in Victoria? I mean, the law is speaking out in Black's Law Dictionary. Praise God for Black's Law Dictionary. It's not a Christian book. It's just law dictionary for lawyers. But we can use this against this regime and say, look, you're destroying the culture. You're trying to destroy the culture. You're trying to have unrestrained powers. You're trying to create a strain of people that follow you, that adhere to your powers, that are going to use the powers that you keep granting them. Say, for example, Daniel Andrews in Victoria creating almost like a super culture of these. You know, what he's trying to do down there with his conversion practices bill. I mean, I don't agree with locking anybody away or hurting anybody if they're questioning their sexuality. I don't believe that at all. But what he's done with that conversion practices act that he's created is created an immunity for the kind of culture that he wants to act as a social wrecking ball, you know. And so he's hiding in his little glass house down there in that Victorian Parliament, which he's not even lawfully sitting. But what he's trying to do is create a sort of a cultural wrecking ball through unlawful laws, then he plays a game. You know, he'll be unlawful with laws, but yet at the same time adhere to law when he needs it, and to smash the individual and to smash their rights. you know. So Daniel Andrews really needs to go back and read Black's Law Dictionary, the preamble in that. And I'll put it up on Shed Gospel here because it's actually really good. You should copy and paste it and share it because it's actually encouraging and it shows you clearly that, you know, for any rule of law to work, they have to identify your own individual dignity. You know, your consent is dignity, isn't it? Like, if you don't consent to something, you're not going to lower your dignity. They have to respect your dignity, and by giving you the option of consenting to something or the option of refusal. Otherwise, it becomes a stripping of your dignity. Same thing like if they, for example, if they say, oh, the jab, if you don't agree with the COVID jab, for example, because you've done your research and you don't feel it's safe, you know, but they go along and they say, oh, well, look, we're not going to make this mandatory, so we have constitutional restraints, we're not allowed to make this mandatory. But then they go and make all this other stuff where they're pushing businesses to then start stripping you of your quality of life because you don't go along with the jab, and they put the business in a position where they're doing the dirty work for the government, and they're refusing you service, which is not a crime. So you're now sort of in this corralled position that you're facing a future and life of having your dignity being removed by the fact you can't go to the airport without having the jab. You can't go to certain services without having had that COVID jab. You know, it's a stripping away of the dignity of you and the dignity of your choice and your believing in your information you've been given, which comes back to your own enlightened self-government. Excuse me. So, I've just got a bit of a tickle in my throat. But, you know, and the reason why I'm even doing this video today, because I just feel, even sort of pushing through some of these symptoms today, people need to have this information available to them. Excuse me. People need to have the most amount of information that shows their freedom very quickly. You know, go back to Black's Law Dictionary. It gives you a great lot of information there. You can actually download it. I think I got all this stuff from archive.org, where some of the earlier versions were free, certainly outside of copyright or something like that. So that's where I got my information. But so really, your dignity, for the rule of law to do anything, your dignity must be preserved. And they have to be able to work with your own enlightened self-government. So if you're self-governing, for example, in your own case, if you say, well, I'm not happy with that, I don't want to go down that path, I'm not happy with the information that says about that vaccine, that looks risky to me, I don't want to put that in my body, thank you very much. But your conscience is working as well. This is the thing too, where your conscience is at work and you're like, well, I feel it's actually going to violate my conscience to, if you feel a certain way about aborted fetus cells in the vaccine, and you say, I feel like that just sort of, you know, goes against the sanctity of human life, for example, and that's in that vaccine, and I don't want to put that in my body, and I feel that's sort of agreeing with the process that they got to do to get that vaccine. You know, if that's how you feel about that, and it's a matter of conscience for you, then, you know, under what the rule of law is supposed to be, you're supposed to have a respect. They're supposed to respect your conscience, your own enlightened self-government. So enlightened being as in, you're doing it for a good reason. You know, you're doing it for a good humanitarian cause, for lack of a better word, or something that it has a moral fibre to what you're saying. You know, so enlightened self-government is not just even self-government, but it's enlightened self-government, as in you've thought about this, you have a conscience, you have feelings, you have sat down and made your decision with a rationale, and you've had the information presented to you in a clear way, and you're not happy with it. And so you have an enlightenment to your decision making. So I'll put that up on Shed Gospel, and you can have a read of it and share it and make it plain and available to all your friends so that they can see what's going on in clarity, and also start resisting this regime that's unlawful in the extreme. God bless you, friends. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.